BC.
It is. All right, thanks again. For some perspective now on the battles in BC, let's bring in media consultant Mike Geoghegan, who joins us from Victoria. Thank you for being on the show. It's certainly a wild and wacky world in British Columbia when it comes to politics, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. We've had no shortage of scandal over the years here in British Columbia.
I want to get into, first of all, this controversy regarding Pat Bell, the jobs minister, and whether he promised or didn't promise to shortlist a particular developer for a project in his city in Prince George, the Wood Innovation and Design Center. There's been a big kerfuffle over this, and it's just one of the scandals, I guess, that the BC Liberals are having to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've worked as a government relations consultant, and in fact, that's what I also still do. And, I've had private conversations with, premiers and cabinet ministers and opposition leaders, and there are times where you can get into discussions which can be somewhat hypothetical. Well, if we were to do this, would that increase our chances? And the problem is that things can get lost in translation, and what may be a sort of vague indication can be taken as okay, let's go ahead and do this, and let's spend significant amounts of money, when in fact there is not necessarily any guarantee that you're going to get be a successful person.
Well, that's interesting because there is that very useful background that you just gave us, and at the same time, the BC Liberals seem to be very sensitive on the Pat Bell issue. I mean, BC Liberal MLA Kevin Kruger sent an email to the BC Conservatives who called Pat Bell an unmitigated disaster on this particular issue, and he really lashed out at them. He called them morons, he called them idiots in this email. I want to read a little portion of it to you. He also said, Pat Bell is beloved in Prince George for good reason. There is not one of you scum worthy to tie his shoes, nor tall enough. I rarely ever hear a politician say anything quite like that.
Well, Kevin is about as subtle as a brick to the forehead. His nickname in the legislature was Foghorn, and he's been very outspoken. He used to be the guy in caucus who, when Gordon Campbell was leader, he'd hammer a caucus and let's rally around our leader. So he is known for being outspoken. I do have to say this though. Kevin Kruger should be grateful that the Conservatives did not change leaders, because if they had had a more popular leader, I think the Conservatives would be cutting in a lot more than they are now to the BC Liberal provincial support.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, and I've heard similar comments before about John Cummins. One of the other issues in British Columbia, of course, is liquefied natural gas and the development of that industry. Obviously, the BC Liberals are very much in favor of it, as are the Conservatives. The NDP seems a little bit ambivalent. Is this a bit of a weak spot for them?
Well, it's a delicate spot for them, because on the one hand, they don't want to alienate those people who are erstwhile Green supporters who have come over to the NDP by coming out wholeheartedly in favor of LNG. On the other hand, they know that the only chance they have of paying for their promises is by having a successful LNG industry. And, they've made great hay in terms of opposing some of the plans in terms of the oil and gas industry and pipelines and whatnot. But they have sort of quietly given their support in terms of LNG. From an environmental standpoint, I'm sure there are many Greens who wouldn't see a lot of difference, so they're walking very delicately in this area.
Yeah, and I mean, take the David Suzuki Foundation, for example. They've come out dead set against LNG in British Columbia, and there probably is a fair amount of overlap between that foundation and NDP and Green supporters, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what the Suzuki Foundation and others of their ilk don't realize is at the end of the day, especially given our aging population base, we need to have resource extraction to pay for healthcare, to pay for education, to pay for road infrastructure, and the like. And if we're not mining, if we're not oil and gas, energy production, and the like, then guess what? We don't have the money for your child's education and to take care of your parents in their golden years. So, I mean, that's the hard, blunt truth of it.
All right. Mike Geoghegan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Still ahead, an unusually public outpouring from the Pope during his